Mitch Joel, are you ready to fearlessly question today?
Never. Who wants to do that? That sounds scary, Joey.
Well, we'll see what we can do then, I guess.
Let's push it. Let's.
Well, I mean, we're here, so we might as well give it a shot. But Mitch, you hold the distinguished honor. I give out fake awards on the show pretty regularly, and you hold the honor of the guest that is the most interesting that I didn't know before I signed up for the show, and I'm just terribly disappointed in what we have to talk about today. I'm going to get through it because I'm a professional, but I wish I didn't know you were so cool. So that's all. I just wanted to welcome you under those circumstances.
I'll have you endorse my next book with that type of statement. Thanks, Joey.
I will gladly do that, Mitch, anytime. So Mitch, I have to say this, and getting to know you and why I'm so unexcited to talk about this topic today. I really know how to sell things, I promise. And it was, you were telling me about how you were just talking really quickly before we came on to do the show, how you're doing a bass podcast for No Trouble and all that fun stuff. We're both bass players. We kind of consider ourselves bass players, I guess, and in some sort of fashion. You look like you're not in total agreement with me, Mitch.
I like to say that I know how to play the bass, but I'm not a bass player. After speaking to these people, I'm no bass player. I'm but a mere mortal. So I know how to play.
Well, anyways, you told me that after your interview with Robert and some of the friends that you've acquired, you've been able to befriend them in a very strange and mystical way, right?
Friends is a loose term, but I
Is it
think
loose
there's a
term?
connection. I think if someone went up to them with a gun and said, "Hey, do you know this guy?" I'm hoping they'd say yes.
Well, I just want to throw it out there in front of everybody, and I say, yeah, I think unless there's a restraining order involved, I want to be your Mitch Joel to your Robert Trujillo, if I could, if that's possible.
This is quickly de-escalating into a bad Saturday Night Live skit, Joey. You wanna start moving this thing forward.
All right. Well, that being said, I'll take that as I will look for something in the mail to keep within a certain distance from your house. But I will continue on. My first non-fearless question to you, sir, kind of related to what we just got into, but just kind of fun. Are entrepreneurs becoming the new rock star?
Yeah, I definitely think that Silicon Valley is the new LA Hollywood or the new Seattle. I mean, I do believe that. I think that you're seeing a lot of the most famous of famous people want to sidle up and be a part of the vibe that is the venture capital of Silicon Valley digital explosion. I don't really think people like myself and Jay Bear or Gary Vaynerchuk are filling stadiums, or that people come and see us speak and then like mouth like sync our presentations. But there's no doubt that there's an excitement and energy around digital that's undeniable for sure. That people want to be a part of it. People want to work at Google. People want to work at Facebook. They want to do a startup. So I think from that respects, it is the area that people look to in terms of what's cool. Nerd culture is starting to rule, right?
I want you to, before we kind of really get into it, I want you to catch everybody up. Tell them your story as it relates to fearlessly questioning surfacing ideas.
Oh, I mean, I think I've always asked the question of, am I really enjoying this, or is this something I really want to do? And there's that old cliche of do what you love and the money will follow. And in retrospect, it's true. I think when you're going through it, you sort of don't see the pieces coming together. But my humble beginnings really did start in the late 80s when I started doing music journalism and interviewing rock stars and punk stars and heavy metal stars. I fell in love with media. I fell in love with writing, creating content, publishing that content, having an audience, having access to somebody special that I could then tell the story of to a mass audience. And the internet really was just coming in, and I had this duality of being very interested in media, but also just as a young person, I was really engaged in technology. As my parents bought for us as a family the first Atari 2600, and before that we had Pong, and then after that we had the Atari 800. So computers were always sort of in my life, and modems, and then this media thing. And obviously when the internet kicked in and I was doing early BBS boards, bulletin board services, and the first web browser, I really felt when I saw that first web browser that this is going to change media. And those are when my world started converging a lot more. And I published music magazines. I put them on the internet back then. I mean, we didn't have hyperlinks back then, but I did that. I then worked for a local community newspaper that was highlighting young entrepreneurs or young business people. I met some guys who were launching a meta search engine and wound up connecting up and being very fascinated with them. This is before the internet boom. Joined that company, went through the boom bust and echo of the internet. Spent time working, man, like I worked for like a mobile content development company. This was 20 years ago, before there was even a mobile internet. I worked in a PR firm that specialized in technology. I launched a record label and then met the guys here at this company, Mirum, which is formerly Twist Image. And my passion really became that world of technology and marketing and media. And that's what Twist Image was for 15 years. We were acquired in May of last year by WPP and changed our name very recently to Mirum, which is now a global digital agency that brought together a bunch of other agencies that were acquired by WPP through the J. Walter Thompson network. And we're called Mirum now, and we're 2,000 plus people in 20 countries. And it's a whole new journey. And I think that, fearlessly has just been the way I've always, I don't think I'm fearless. I'm totally fearful of everything. I'm an anxious, nervous person like everyone else, but I do believe in my skills and my competencies, and I've done my best in my journey to follow that without really focusing on whether or not it's paying the bills. And I don't want to say I'm lucky and it paid off. I mean, it's a crazy amount of work, but it paid off.
I was gonna say it sounds fancy, a little complicated, and I might not know where to start with all those mergings and a lot of that where the company has kind of become. But you got out of bed and you did it, right? Like that. I think, is that not like you just kind of stood up and went forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I love Seth Godin and James Altucher as writers and thinkers and speakers, and I'm lucky that I get to call people like that friends now. And I guess I read it and loved it so much because it was me, to a certain degree. And I love the content because it inspires me more to remember to be like that. There are moments in my life where I don't feel like that. There are moments like where I take a job because I think it's the thing to do. And then I call it Uncontrollably, my second book. I call it Squiggle. I sort of squiggle in and out of things. Um, but I don't want to give off this idea that I'm this really confident, fearless person who's just running with it. I think Gary Vaynerchuk does it way better than I do in terms of that. I'm not more humble. I'm just more honest with myself and honest with my peers, you guys, that it's hard. It's scary. There are a lot of sleepless nights. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of self-doubt. There's a lot of moments where you do stand up but you don't know why you're doing it. And I can look back and attribute that to a lot of the thinking that like someone like a Brene Brown would talk about, the vulnerability and the being okay with critics and the trying to put stuff out there that matters. But I don't want to make it sound like I'm super confident and I know this is like it's complex. It's very, very complex.
Well, we'll go ahead and might as well jump right into the real thing then. We'll take the gloves off and hopefully you're ready for it. But the real fearless question, the first fearless question to you is it seeing the idea that is the problem, or is it finding the confidence in them?
Yeah, I don't know if it's either. I think it's looking at something and trying to figure out what the right questions are. And I've always been fascinated with questions. I interviewed rock stars and I knew that they were just bringing one in after the other. All these journalists, tell me about the new album. When are you going on tour? Why did you use that producer? And I knew that they were going to be asked that, and so I wanted to dive deeper. I didn't want to go in with questions in a row. I wanted to understand them and have a conversation with them. But those conversations don't happen if you're not asking yourself better questions. And I find that, when people say like, write your ideas down, I tend to write down questions and I tend to try and look for answers in those, whether it's in content that exists or in my own journey of discovery. So I look at it like that. Like, what are the better questions? Is this business that I'm working with as an agency, are they asking the right questions? Are we asking the right questions of them? And maybe it's a bit cliche and it's something people say all the time, ask better questions, but I think that really is what it's about.
Well, if you don't know what question to ask, you don't really know where to start then. I mean, yes.
Yeah, and you also don't know what a better question is, and that's the real journey. The journey is in figuring out every time how you can ask better and better questions relevant to that experience.
So how do you then ask better questions and find even better answers?
Work, ton of digging, ton of hard work, ton of analysis, ton of research, ton of brainstorming in terms of listening to other people's ideas, exploration. Um, when you're when you're a journalist, and I never considered myself a journalist, I always hesitate when I use those words. Like, I wrote about music, I wasn't a journalist. Um, you need to have a nose for news. And I think if there's sort of one thing in that that I think I do have, it's a nose for news. Like, I can see enough things pop up where I'm like, there's something here. And whether it's like jot down a note on a notebook or sort of save something, I'm developing that scent of there's something here that I need an answer to. And so it's not just in terms of creating a blog post or a book. It also happens in the sense of trying to figure out what problem we're trying to solve here.
What's the best question you've ever asked yourself then?
I think I don't think it's one question. I think it's one word. It's why. Why is the best question always. And why will always drive a strategy. And it's too bad because I think we live in a world of what. What should I do on Facebook? What should I do on this? And why? Why should I be on YouTube? Why should I do a Google Hangout? Why should I podcast? The beautiful thing about why is you can talk yourself in or out of it. And so that's where the interesting questions come out from. And that's the real challenge from my perspective.
So one thing that I've really come to admire about, kind of the way, at least I can picture your brain working. I don't have like an inside look onto the thing, but the question that I kind of want to know is should we stop ourselves from looking in strange places for new skills then?
No, I mean, strange places. I think a lot of people think it's linear. If I go to this event and meet that person, I'll get that business. And it's not. It's squiggly. It's circular. I went to that event. I met that person. That person introduced me to somebody. I'd sent them an article. They got fired. And I mean, that's sort of what it is. So I never look at success as sort of this thing I did or this thing you did. It's this thing that happened through these very different things and places. My experience has been that the stranger or more obscure places that I look, uh, the sort of the more interesting things come out. I'll find myself like randomly pick up a magazine on architecture, and I'll be like, oh, that's weird. That article on that building, like I had a question about the sort of framing of something else, and that person answered it in some silly quote that was not even related to what I was thinking, but something connected things, and there's an answer there.
Well, leading up to this thing, I cited you as creating or being responsible for or putting together the single greatest podcast I'd ever listened to, and that was the whether you want to take that as a compliment or not, I'll leave that up to you. But it was a podcast we talked about. You did with James Altucher, and it was 425 laughing all the way to the bank, I believe.
Right. James is a amazing human being, an amazing writer, and a brilliant mind. And he sent me a note a while back saying, I don't think you realize this, but a lot of what I think your success comes from the fact that you obviously have an affinity for stand-up comedy. And it's a weird thing because I don't really watch a lot of stand-up comedy. I don't really even listen to a lot of stand-up comedy, but I do have like a love of like that whole Jerry Seinfeld comedians in cars getting coffee. I have this like affinity and passion for books like Steve Martin's Standing Up. There's something about that lifestyle of the individual person getting up on stage by themselves and grabbing the microphone and seeing what happens that as a speaker I can obviously relate to, as a previous business owner, but now a guy who's running a business can still appreciate that mechanics of like, how do you tell that story so that the laugh is always a surprise or something. So there's something there. And as we explored it through email, we both said this would be like an interesting conversation. Let's record it. And so I challenged James, and he took me up on it. So we recorded that show talking about how you don't have to be funny or a comedian or even want to get up onto a stage to be able to use stand-up comedy to make you extremely successful. There's a lot of lessons in stand-up comedy that are directly sort of related to being successful.
What fascinated me about that is that not too many people are willing or able to make that connection and then share it with other people, like to willingly admit this. It's like that kind of thing you just kind of keep to yourself and not sure if anyone's going to judge you for.
Yeah, so again, like you talked about those connection points, and it made me realize after I talked to James that like I used to do magic shows when I was like 10 or 11. Magic, that's interesting. I used to collect comic books. I guess I still sort of do. I love reading comics. I'm really expressing my nerd out to the world. But all of these things, when I stop and look at them and what they mean, they really do have a role in who I've become. And I tend to think we look at things like what our degree was or where we worked last versus like the things that really inspired us as children and that really got us jazzed. And then I'm lucky that I can look back and think that, wow, in my life, like there were a couple of those things that were paramount to me pursuing things the way I pursued them.
One word answer on Netflix Daredevil.
Yes.
Yes, fantastic. Well, we're going to take a break. We're going to let you turn the tables on the audience and ask a fearless question of your own, something that you have always wanted to know the answer to, but we're a little unsure of the response. You're lucky enough to get asked that question today, Mitch. What is it?
Yeah, when I'm speaking to people and we get into the deep stuff, I always ask them what's holding you back. And I ask that question because it's a two-way street. One is it allows that person to really hopefully think about it deeply and come back with like some of the real sort of answers. And two is as they're ruminating and going through it in their brain and letting the words come out vocally into the world, into me, I'm trying to figure out ways I can help them because that's what happened to me. All right. I went out and asked for help. Maybe I was more vocal and I was able to ask for help. Some people aren't. And so that question to me allows them to maybe work through something while at the same time allows me to sort of go through my mental Rolodex and go like, how can I help them? It's like, what's that show? Was it Survivor or Fast Pass? The one with the Fast Pass where you take, the Amazing Race, Fast Pass, right? It's like, I'm always looking for a Fast Pass because I'm super lazy, I think. So I think that question helps both parties a lot.
And that's an interesting question. Actually, it's a reoccurring theme on the show.
Oh, good.
A lot of people have kind of mentioned that in a roundabout way. I think the closest, Chris Brogan said something almost very similar to yours. So I guess you brought up a different angle of asking for help. Is that kind of intertwined with like, I mean, is that like at the root of the thing of just not asking for the right help from the right person?
Help's a funny thing. My experience with people asking for help is that they don't have, a lot of times they're missing the emotional IQ to know when they're boxing in or out of their weight class. I tend to ask for help when I'm boxing either in or beneath my weight class. I feel uncomfortable when I'm boxing out of my weight class, asking someone who's like really done something to do this massive introduction when they don't owe me anything and I have no reason to. And I get asked a lot of times by people where I feel like, wow, they're really boxing out. Hey, Mitch, I know I haven't seen you in 25 years, but could you write me a LinkedIn recommendation? You're boxing out of your weight class. And that's a minor, stupid little thing. But I tend to do it when I try and really think about, am I boxing my weight class? Is it really sort of like, if by helping me, they're also helping themselves? And those are the areas where I feel the most traction happens. And then what happens, obviously, when you do this well, is you can start, you move up and you move up to other weight classes, which is where you want to be.
So you're saying I should probably not ask for that introduction to Robert then at the end of this thing. Is that what you're suggesting?
Right. But if we were like amazingly great friends and Robert mentioned something to me and I was like, oh, I can make that connection, I'd be, of course. I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it benefits everyone. And that's the thing. When you ask for help, there needs to be, even if it's minor, there needs to be a bit of benefit. And sometimes the benefit is just that it makes me feel good to help somebody. There's a lot of people like that in the world. I mean, sometimes people will ask me a question where they think they're boxing out of their weight class and they're not. I'm actually really honored and I want to help when I can. And then I also want to do it if it doesn't mean I'm boxing out of my weight class when I have to ask the other person, which is, in the case of a Robert Trujillo, it would have to be something major because I think I'd be boxing my weight class. I don't think I know him well enough to ask him for anything.
It's very interesting, and I have a feeling that that varies between. I mean, I'm sure you've heard a lot of crazy things, and then you can only go on forever about the different weight classes that you've had to experience and fight in. But we'll go ahead and jump back on track here, and this is something that it's more of a statement. I don't know if there's really a question here, but I just want to get you to react to it, and you can decide to leave the interview at this point if you want. But it seems like, with all of the stuff that I've kind of tried to gather from you and your ideas and the way that you allow them to influence other ideas, you do allow them to cross-pollinate maybe more than other people. So kind of what we were just talking about with the comedy and things like that. but more than that, you it seems like you encourage them or even want them to kind of outgrow themselves. Is that like a necessity? Because you want them to be something bigger, I think, and that's very exciting to me.
It's an interesting like take on it. I don't know if I've ever been that self-reflective on the body of work I produce. I would take it. The way I look at it is, I think that like content needs to be great. Like all the things you hear, the stuff that I don't think you hear enough about, and I've written about it, but I have a small voice, is that you need to be persistent, and that 450 plus podcasts later, 5,000 blog posts later, and not bragging, I think it's about persistence. Like part of it's like, well, eventually one of them will be good, right? Or part of it is, wow, people are liking it and liking it, and it's sort of growing monthly, or there's a weekly growth, or there's something that's interesting there. But people forget about persistence, and then in thinking about persistence, what they're forgetting about is legacy. So I also look back and I go, well, what's the legacy of this? So my blog lasted 2 years when blogging was really cool. I mean, what legacy do I want to leave? And for me, it's less about blogging and it's more about, I want to leave a legacy of written word. So there's a blog and there's articles that I contribute to, and there's books, audio, video, there's podcasts, there's this, there's archive. I want to leave a legacy of this stuff, not just for me, but for people who want to grow their business, for people who want alternative thinking. So persistence legacy would be more my space.
I think, well, and again, I'm glad that I can provide you with self reflection. If I can do one thing for you, at least you can walk away from the show with that.
And your
And
handsome tie.
well, thank you, sir. I mean, when you're courting a new friend, you have to come dressed for the occasion. But
And boy, do
uh,
you.
but no, seriously though, I think I want to say that it's more than that. I'm going to push back a little bit on that. I'm going to say that I feel like you kind of want it to be more than just a legacy, where you want the idea to fundamentally kind of shape what's coming next.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I would love more popularity, and
We
I
have
know
no
some.
time for humbleness. Let's go, Mitch. Just
Yeah, no,
let's
I would
go.
love more popularity. I would love to have as many followers as Chris and Gary and Ann Handley and all these people that I love and respect. I'd love that. Who wouldn't want more people liking what you do? That's why we do things. So there's that, and that drives me to want to do more. But at the same time, I don't dismiss what I've built. I mean, I can look at the numbers and go, "That's pretty good, you local yokel, you." Like I can be self-deprecating uh, in what I do as well. But what I appreciate most is that when I speak to people whom I respect a lot, and hopefully they're being honest, they'll say things like, "We consider you the marketer's marketer." Or like it's like you're the stuff that like you're not that, you may not be as popular as that person, because I think most people like want to like hide the fact that like they learned from you, like it's almost like keep it to yourself. And so maybe they're just pandering to me and it's my ego that doesn't allow me to accept that as a really nice thing. And or maybe it's true, but I'm not one to be like, good job. But the most complimenting thing is when people say like you're a marketer's marketer. Or Seth Godin, we did the book launch for Control Alt Delete at Google in New York, and Seth sort of interviewed me. We had like a sort of like jam session. It's on YouTube, you can watch it. And he did this intro that I didn't know he was going to do, and he just is talking so kindly about me. It's like I almost didn't want to go on stage after. I was like, cut. We could just use that. That's perfect, right? Because it was honest. But what he said that really resonated with me, and it made me self-realize, was that he said that he respects who I am because I'm a doer. I don't just talk and publish and post and speak. Like I actually work with clients day in and day out, and I have the struggle of running this business. That it was sort of like a different level to him, and it really spoke to me. And when doers do things, I have so much more respect for people who are like that, and that's why I admire the people that I've mentioned already and many others so much.
I actually watched that just about an hour ago in preparation, as I was engrossing myself in too much Mitch Joelness. But and you're right. And again, Seth kind of cheats because he can make anything sound like he just takes a completely different perspective on everything and just makes it sound way cooler than it maybe is if somebody else just read it. But which is probably why everyone listens to him. But I guess what was interesting from that is you kind of hinted at like there's like your self-perception within the hierarchy of the people you kind of run around with, as in like uh, the company that you've mentioned to me that you keep, it would seem like you would be on par, if not, let's say, above like the people that you just mentioned. I mean, do you guys keep score? That's just, I guess.
I think we all do, and I do it in a sort of, I call it the healthy, humble way. I do it in the sense of I look at, let's say Gary Vaynerchuk is such an amazing role model. You forget the F bombs and the crazy hands and his love of him. It's amazing. It's a character. He's great. I look at him and I go, well, if he's got over 1 million followers and I've got 65,000, not that it's a numbers game. I just know that my market is 10 times that where I'm at, right? I can look at someone like Seth and see vaguely bestseller X amount of weeks, and I can be like, wow, so if you write a book in the genre of marketing or business innovation, you could go to that potential. I can look at someone like a Malcolm Gladwell and say, like, okay, you can think like that in a quirky way and get that type of thing. So I don't look at it in terms of like a harumph. Why don't that many people follow me? And blah, blah, blah. I look at it in like that humble way of like, I have so much more runway versus knowing like I can't grow my market anymore. So to me, it's amazing because I'm like, wow, the market is so much bigger, and that's great. And then for the people who maybe don't have the amount of followers I have or the content I have, they can realize that they can even achieve that is great. So I don't look at it like what, like what. I look at it like very affirming and positive, and I always believe that there's enough success to go around. It's like it's not like he has it all or she has it all, so I can't because there's nothing left. Well, it's not like that. It's an abundance model, and I've always loved the fact that why I love digital is because it moved advertising from a scarcity model to one of abundance. I love the abundance model, and so I think it's great.
You mentioned yourself as the marketer's marketer. I'm
I
assuming
didn't.
that's a
Someone else did. See, now you're making me be
well,
embarrassed.
sorry. Okay, so I remember you saying marketer's marketer, which just made me come back to the comedy thing of the comedian's comedian. So like maybe Louis C.K. has outgrown his comedian's comedian role, or if you maybe consider yourself the Bill Burr of marketing now.
Right.
But I guess the question is, do you get to be that person still and be Gary Vaynerchuk at the same time, or would you even want to be? Or I guess what is more valuable to you?
Well, what's most valuable to me is that when I wake up and I produce something, more people get value from it, use it, want to connect with it, want to work with Miram as their agency, that people see in the marketplace work that resonates, that matters. We all wake up, we all go out into this world and have to put a lot of hours into it. It's not even as, some of us are putting in 10, 12 hours a day. You want to make sure that those count. If you're going to be away from those you love or the more sort of frivolous things, you want to make sure that those matters count. So that's my scorecard. It's not an individual or a number. It's that. And knowing that it's a bigger market gives you that sort of like a bit of a boundary on it, which is great. And those guys can still probably grow a ton as well, which is again just speaks to the awesomeness of it.
My final fearless question to you, Mitch, and I promise I'll remove myself from your life, and you can get back on to interviewing cool bass players.
We'll be friends forever, Joe. You know
No, it's Mitch. It's okay. I've accepted my fate in this world. Uh, I want you to, before I ask this question, I want you to take it from, the point of view of which, me thinking, outgrowing your current ideas and wanting to leave that kind of, greater change, maybe transcendent change across, different platforms. But what idea are you afraid to surface?
Hmm. I guess I'm afraid to surface the idea that in the end it just has to be dumb advertising. That's probably the one that's rubbing me the most now, that it's just so easy to throw money at it and just spread impressions everywhere. And the hard work of building continuity and content and a real brand and a resonance and have it go from generation to generation to create a legacy. Oh, it's a lot of work in a quarter by quarter Wall Street dependent world. And it's just easier to throw money at the situation and put an impression out in front of somebody. So that's the question, because fundamentally my career has been based on this idea that digital can do so much more than that. And I do unfortunately feel when I see things like Facebook earnings and stuff like that, that we might be falling into this sort of mass media advertising trap. If we fall into a world where it's about Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, which actually is owned by Facebook, and that all the revenue, or Google, and that all the revenue is going to those four, and it's mostly advertising based, all I think of in my brain is ABC, NBC, CBS. And I don't want the internet or digital to become that. I want it to be this amazing tapestry of individuals who can build mass audiences and can do things like this and broadcast to the world. I don't want it to be about 3 or 4 channels that are taking the dominant bulk of the ad revenue. And right now, it's fallen that way. So that's the stuff I'm afraid of.
So if you're saying that in a way that you're afraid that you would be wrong on that bet and that it would ultimately be advertising that is going to prevail.
Or that's what wins. Like it's not a bet. It's just that like that just becomes the easiest thing. So these big brands are just like, yeah, to hell with it, just advertise. Like, my running philosophy now is like, if you want to be successful on YouTube, don't try and sell on YouTube. Try and become a part of that community, a part of that audience. It's a lot harder to do, but it's pretty easy to sell to them, buy some ads and put them in front of all those videos. So yeah, those are the stuff that definitely, keeps me up at night.
Do you think it will happen then, I guess?
It's happening. I mean, it's happening. I do worry when Facebook throttles news feeds. I do worry when you have to pay for access to audiences. I do worry when Twitter starts allowing brands to direct message anybody. Yeah, I start worrying that these are just things that brands do to get revenue that may not be best for the consumer or the ways in which I think consumers want to connect to brands and vice versa.
And if you could leave the audience with one thing to do to surface their own idea today, what would it be?
Start the legacy. Figure out if it's text, images, audio, video, long form, short form. Choose a medium format that you are passionate about. Choose a niche subject, whatever, and start exploring it. It's never been easier to do this stuff. It's nothing new. I'm sure millions of other people on the show have said this, but start the legacy.
Mitch, I really appreciate you taking the time. Obviously, where can people go to find out more about Mitch?
Just Google Mitch Joel. That's the easiest. I'd love to tell you go to this link or that link, but the truth is because of the acquisition and because of the transitions, I'm still balancing URLs and stuff. But if you just do a search for Mitch Joel, you'll find me.
I like that. You're the first person to say Google me on the show. So maybe that can become a new thing. But Mitch, awesome. It's been great to talk with you and maybe try and be friends with you sometime. We'll update everybody on that. But if everybody wants to hear the fearless question Mitch was most afraid to ask himself, well, feel free to head over to fearlesslyquestioning.com. You can go ahead and grab that along with all of our previous guests as well. Some of them we mentioned here today as well. Mitch, thanks a lot for being here. We're going to get out of here. Catch you guys on the next one.
It was great. Thanks, Joey.